Roger, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Hey, I'm glad to be here again.
Well, this is going to be an ambitious project because you are one of my favorite guests, and actually my team came up to me. My team is reading your book, and they came up and go,
"All right,
man, this guy Roger is fantastic. You know, we can't wait to hear how this podcast comes out." But I want to tee you up in a way that is so that I want people to feel my passion for this conversation and for your background. And so I'm literally going to read it. I'm not going to try to memorize it because I want to make sure I get this for everybody. So who am I talking to today? Roger Grimes, data-driven defense evangelist at KnowBe4. And if you don't know KnowBe4, then there's a problem. So KnowBe4 is a leader. But we're going to talk about Roger. You know, Roger made his first debut in this podcast in 2020. In that episode, we unlocked the truth and disproved a lot of assumptions about multifactor authentication, which still today is amazingly relevant, authentication and access control. And we talked about assumptions and misconceptions about multi-factor authentication. I still recommend people go read that book. And we're going to put a link to that as well, one previous. And also, you just wrote this book called Ransomware Protection Playbook. Now, this is a primer. I literally, you can see little stickies and everything that's all over this book. And I literally ran into my CTO and I said, listen, this is what you've been preaching about for 20 years. And it is, and then every CIO, I just unpack because I think every CIO should read this, regardless of size of the organization. And not just CIOs. I mean, like everybody that's in cybersecurity. I'm passionate about the leaders of organization getting a real clue about some of the basics and fundamentals, but everybody in cybersecurity should read this. So he's a senior. So you've written 14 books, 10 solo and 4 co-written. And you're the senior computer security consultant, cybersecurity architect with over 30 years experience in some of the biggest companies of the world like Foundstone, McAfee, and Microsoft. You specialize in host network security, quantum security, identity management, anti-malware, hackers, honeypots, public PKI security, cloud security, APTs. I love that. Advanced persistent threat, cryptography, policy, and technical writing. Your mission, which I love, is centered around educating the world about computer security and defense in order to make the internet safe for all people who are on this really amazingly growing, powerful internet that we have here. You've been a columnist from 2005 to 2019 for InfoWorld, CSO Magazine, written over 1,100 magazine articles. And you've also been guests on NPR's All Things Considered, which we've all heard, of course, it's CNN and the Wall Street Journal. So, this is a real pleasure to have you on today, Roger.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow. That's got to be one of the best intros. I have to send you a check.
Well, it's well-deserved. And I'm it's definitely my enthusiasm for our conversation. This really interesting. I love history and I think it's always really important sometimes people have a vision for the future, but a vision is really difficult to navigate. Like, Elon's vision is get to Mars. We know if we're going to get to Mars or not. Okay. But the vision is pretty ambitious because we've already been to the moon once. I mean, it's not like we go there every time, but he wants to go to Mars. And your vision is to educate the planet. Where did that start from? How did you get this vision or mission for yourself?
Yeah, it's been a long-term mission, since I got into this probably in 1987. But I literally wake up every day and my number one goal is to make the internet a far safer place. And I know how to do it. I mean, it's not only education, but really kind of re-architecting the internet because the internet's full of danger, right? Like a large portion of the traffic on the internet every day is purely malicious. And we all get taken advantage of, even when they're as savvy as you and I. Certainly, our friends, our family, our parents, our kids, I hear about these scams being done all the time. And so I really do have this passion where I'm trying to make the internet a far safer place. I think I actually know how to do it. And I think I know how to do it better than most people. Like I was a penetration tester for 20 years and I broke into every place I was ever hired to break into. in an hour or less, except for one place that took me 3 to 5 hours. That's hundreds of places, government organizations, banks. But on a scale of 1 to 10 for hacking, I'm a 5, maybe a 6. But on defending, I literally think I'm the best in the world. Like, it's a really weird thing, but I've looked at what everybody else is offering. And I would say I'm a guy you want in your boardroom when you're trying to figure out how to defend stuff. I've just thought about, I literally wake up every day. I spend hours a day thinking about it. Even my beautiful wife of 22 years, when we got married, I spent we went on a honeymoon to Myrtle Beach. And I remember I was up in my room writing my first or second book. I can't remember what, but she was on the beach suntanning and she had no problem with it. Oh my God, I've married the right woman. And she literally hears me speak about it all the time. And it's haunting in a way, because this might be surprising to some people, but we know how to make the internet far more secure. And I've written about it for 20 years. I've got white papers out there called Fix the Internet. If you want to search on, or if you email me at rogerg@knowbefore.com, I'll send you the PDF. But literally, we have the technical things that it takes to make the internet far more secure, but it's just getting people to agree to do it. It's kind of like, airplane security. We kind of knew that people could sneak bombs on a plane and water bottles in their shoes and their underwear, but it took the event and blood on the ground happening before we actually implemented the security. Well, same thing in the internet. We actually know how to do it. We just, you can't, it's hard to get people in your own family to agree on something, much less the world. And you have law enforcement on one end that wants to spy on people, and you have the people that want to be truly anonymous, that don't want any controls whatsoever. With that said, I think I actually found a solution to actually get them to agree. And let me say again, my life goal is to make the internet far more secure. And if I probably got 10, 15 years left of my career, I'm 55. If I do not accomplish this, my professional life will have been a waste. It's what drives me every day. It drives me in the jobs that I take and the career that I follow. And I'm haunted by the idea that I will not accomplish it before I retire or die. But I'm trying. I'm not going down without a fight.
Well, this is a big thing, a big lesson for, I think, everybody listening, is that we need to have goals that potentially we can't reach in our lifetime. And something that motivates us, and there's a likelihood that it won't be achievable, and that's where that energy and passion comes from. And so I love that big plan. Now, the interesting thing for you, and I think this is good for everybody to remind it. So you put yourself on the defense continuum as being in the top 1/10 of 1% in the world, the top person. However, you have a friend of yours. I don't know. I forget the relationship between you and Kevin Mitnick, but I think everybody knows Kevin. Well, if you don't know Kevin Mitnick, we'll put a link and everybody can read about him. But now you would put him where, as far as, if you're one of the top defenders, where would you put him as far as an offensive guy that's trying to break in?
Yeah, Kevin. So back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, he was probably the most infamous hacker. There's been movies and books and stuff. And it was interesting. When he got arrested for hacking, there was a movement called Free Kevin that went around. I actually wrote an article called Put His Ass in Jail because I was not a fan. But he actually was one of the, he spent some time in jail, tends to sober you up. And he was a kid. And he really wasn't like stealing credit cards to steal people's money and stuff. He actually did do some stuff that, impacted people's identity, but he was just trying to get access to phones and stuff like that. But he very quickly came out and became this force for good, to show people how it's done. And even when I met him, I became friends with him. I actually wrote an article later on that said, this guy's really turned around. I'd watch him at conferences and he really had good stuff to say. He still got the best demos. As a kid, he was into magicians and stuff, and you can see it in his demo. I think he has the best demos. And I even thought for a while, he's just a showman. No, he's one of the best hackers I've ever seen in my life. But
really?
He's honest, he's ethical. His joke to me was, I get the same thrill he's got he's not only co-owner of Know Before, and he's our chief hacking officer, but he also, what he really loves is penetration testing. He's like, and he told me, I get the same thrill penetration testing as I did when I was a kid doing it illegally. He said, except for there's more paperwork. I was like, yeah. And, and he said, I wish there were more today. If you want to learn how to hack, there literally are hundreds of places you can go hack me, hack this website, hack my website, hackme.com and that sort of stuff. Well, they didn't have that, for him to play around with. But I do it is ironic that we ended up in the same company, and I consider him a friend, and he's just a great guy. But yeah, I kind of see myself as this uber defender, and he's actually a defender too, but he's definitely pushing it from, hey, this is what's possible.
Right.
And at least a handful of times, he has taught me that things are possible that I literally, it's like, nope, you can't do it. You can't do it. I know, because I'm a defender, and I know what's possible with the technology. And then he went ahead and did it. And sometimes he'll embarrass me, and he'll use me as part of his demos. And so I told him I got to be careful not to say he can't do anything, because he has actually made me eat crow a couple of times. But what's nice about that, and like even recently we were talking about password policy, he was proving to me that he could crack human created passwords up to 20, 22 characters fairly easily.
Wow.
And I was telling him, no, you can't, blah, blah, blah. I can't say. And then he proved it to me. And I'm like, you know what? I have to change the advice I give. So by doing kind of his offensive penetration testing and stuff like that, his real world hacks, it helps me provide better advice to people. Like, so I used to say, if you want to make sure you don't get hacked, make sure you have a 12 character password or 16 character password. Well, he proved to me he's cracking 20, 22 character passwords pretty routinely in real world, penetration testing engagement. So it's changed the advice I give. So I think we kind of feed off of each other. But to be honest with you, I'm probably a pain in his butt, because I'm constantly arguing with him, and it takes him, he's got to drill it through my head that, no, Roger, this can be done.
Well, I think it's also really powerful that, I talked about I just put a post yesterday on our board. I've really surrounded myself with people that are just have extraordinary capabilities way beyond myself in certain domains. And I think it's really important for people to surround themselves with counterbalances, so that they're not necessarily yes people, but people that really stretch them to. So how can you continue to refine your craft as the best defender if you didn't go against the top offense? It's like playing basketball one-on-one. One's got to be the defender, one's got to be the offense, and you got to switch roles. It's like it keeps you really sharp. So that's really interesting. I'm glad we talked about that, because it came up in our last conversation as well. That's neat. I had a couple thoughts regarding. Let's jump into crypto. Everybody's into. I'm really interested in a couple things that have been boggling. I'm not sure. Maybe in the research for your book, you thought about. What is your thought on U.S. government's involvement with cryptocurrency right now, and where do you see that going?
Well, I think one of the most interesting things I've seen, let me say, and I bought Bitcoin, and I've got an account that I do some trading and I make some money on with cryptocurrencies. But I think that cryptocurrencies, Web 3.0, NFTs, all that stuff, super hyped, and they're not nearly as secure as they say they are. They don't really do what they claim they do at their very core, and they're overused and overvalued. But it hasn't, stopped people from making hundreds of billions of dollars. And I think that overall, right now there's like 1,000, 2,000 cryptocurrencies. You're certainly going to see, I think, a melding of who's going to make it type thing. But I think they're going to be more regulated over time. I think that's pretty much the writings on the wall there. And I think what even more interesting is just as it applies to ransomware, I think, is that the Department of Justice at the end of last year created a team, cryptocurrency investigation team or something. But, they've been successful in clawing back stolen cryptocurrencies and shutting and pulling, so many ransomwares, you pay the ransom, they're able to go in and get it. They just recently arrested that husband and wife couple that stole initially $75 million of cryptocurrency, or someone stole it. It ended up in wallets under their control, and now it's worth like $4.6 billion. But it was interesting is that couple tried to do some fairly advanced money laundering, but part of the problem with cryptocurrency is that you may be anonymous until someone ties your wallet to your real identity. But what wallet it belongs to is actually on the blockchain forever, right? That's one, both the heaven and the hell of it. But if the government or somebody else can tie it to you, then it really, they can literally follow that transaction. Even if you try to do obscuring and mixing transactions. And there's really these really sophisticated methods. Well, the U.S. government proved none of that worked. And you know, it's kind of, and let me say, I know of dozens of companies now. All they do is exist to follow cryptocurrency transactions, you know, Elliptic and a bunch of other ones you've never heard of, that they are funded by. When I talked to a guy a little while ago that's worked on a couple of those teams, and he told me that the vast majority of their clients are not law enforcement. That was surprising to me. I thought, you know, their clients would be the FBI and CIA and Department of Justice. He's like, nope, that's a smaller part of our income, at least for the couple of companies he's been involved in. But, you know, he said that most of it is actually private organizations. So larger Fortune 500 companies that are trying to keep on track of this, you know, cybersecurity insurance companies, you know, there's a lot of entities. And so you have dozens of companies that literally follow the money. And even if the cryptocurrency guys, they do things called mixing or fogging. They'll try to do, you know, chain jumping and switch out to different currencies, going to Ethereum and stuff. But the mixing is the most interesting one. You suppose you stole $1 million in this ransomware attack. You take it into a mixer or fog, or there's like 10 different names for these guys. So it's money laundering. So you take and transfer your cryptocurrency, your $1 million cryptocurrency into their wallet. They're bringing in all kinds of other money from other legal and illegal means. And then they spit it out in different amounts and chunks to a whole bunch of different wallets. So theoretically, it's hard to follow the money. But let me say, I think something criminals should note: the U.S. government followed the money, accounted for every cent. And that couple, it turned out that, you know, they were not able to get out most of the money that they had put into it, right? They had, imagine, you know, that you have money worth $4.6 billion. That's got to be a heady thing.
Yeah,
for sure. They were only successful, I think, in getting millions out, something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think getting money. Well, I mean, I went on Coinbase a couple of years ago, just when it started getting hot, and maybe 5 years ago, and I bought some, but they had to it was a process to verify my identity. Now my identity is known at Coinbase. But then in my wallet, when I was buying different things, I was practicing buying things, you know, around the world, and I wanted to see how this whole process worked. And I could see that my identity was essentially obfuscated, of course, to the buyers, and I was like, okay, they're not really knowing who I am, and I get it that the bank is not involved, and I get it that this is a powerful way to go around the banking system, but I still have to get the money out. And that has to come into the banking system, and it was not clear to me how it was not clear to me how you can move large chunks of money out without being found. And
it helps by being in a cyber criminal safe haven like Russia, China, Iran, North Korea.
Yes.
Right. But even lately, I used to say for years, Russia is a cyber criminal safe haven. You never get arrested. Well, lately they've been arresting some ransomware affiliates. They arrested some crypto mining people. And even this is an interesting one. So the U.S. government traced that some of the ransomware money was actually going through an exchange and out to real money through a legitimate entity. So there's this guy in Russia with billions of dollars. He's very closely linked to cybercrime, but he has this legitimate money. But it seemed many people would suppose that he is laundering money for ransomware criminals or part of the gang or whatever. But the United States government said, hey, he's got this legitimate exchange that makes more money in a legitimate market. And they went, hey, you keep doing this, and we're going to put a do not trade with you. We're going to crush your larger legitimate business. So even without having to maybe completely follow the money, they put pressure on this guy, and he's now not seemingly doing as much illegal stuff, you know. And of course, if he steps outside of Russia or any place that has accepts our treaties, he's arrested. You know, so they have to be careful where they go on vacation, because we're constantly, you know, arrested. I remember I was at Microsoft, we did this cool thing where we offered one of the thieves we were trying to arrest out of Russia a really big job, high paying job, and had him come meet us in a country that accepted our treaties. And when he showed up for the job, we actually had him work on a computer and show us how good of a hacker he was. We actually key logged all of his keys and passwords. We were able to access his machines and unlock stuff. And also had him arrested. And I thought, boy, they like set up a real company, incorporated it in the other country. And it was very devious. Putin himself asked Obama back then to let this guy out of prison, which never happened. But as far as I know.
Oh,
I'm
really?
Sure there's some future prisoner swap going to go on, probably.
Oh, no way. Well, you make a big point about Russia in the book. I should say you make some targeted points about Russia and had a very clever. I was going to follow this process of asking you questions about the book, but I'm kind of finding it more interesting just to kind of go with the flow here with like you had said, well, why is it so hard to find ransomware on a machine? And you went through a bunch of reasons why, but then you thought you brought up this point about the Russian language and the different derivatives of the Russian language through the Ukraine and other places. And maybe you can explain one of the little tactics that can be used to limit ransomware launching.
Yeah, so most ransomware is out of Russia and Ukraine and some other place. But they're absolutely the stronghold. I mean, you get Iran, China, North Korea. North Korea actually funds their nuclear program with stolen ransomware gains and stolen cryptocurrency. But Russia is certainly the mothership of all of it. And there's, since the beginning of it, all the ransomware people, if you're in Iran, you try not to attack Iranian targets. If you're in Russia, you don't target Russia or even the Ukraine or affiliates. So most ransomware will check on Windows machines, at least, will check for code languages, somewhere between usually around 5 or 10 or 15 languages, Russian, Cyrillic, Ukrainian, there's all these derivations. So some people have found great success in that if you just set as a second language Russian Cyrillic, so you have your Windows machine, it's in English or whatever, and you set it to Russian Cyrillic, and I've tried this against dozens of pieces of ransomware, and it checks and it quits.
No.
It can't be the ultimate, and there's bound to be ways that they're doing, but it's an interesting if everybody did it, they would just somehow figure out around it. But it is kind of interesting, right? So the idea is in any country, you don't want to piss off your country's own leaders. And when you're attacking other countries, your people don't care about it as much. You're seen as a hero, or in some cases, your mother's bragging about you. So the same thing in China, right? I actually spent a lot of time in China for Microsoft, helping China to get more secure, but it wasn't to secure themselves against other Chinese hackers. It was to secure themselves against the English attackers and stuff like that, and NSA, right? Because there's always, again, this written agreement that you don't attack people. And let me say, from a legal standpoint, you want to cross these jurisdictional boundaries so that they can't arrest you, even if they know it's you. We know we've got warrants out for dozens of people in Russia and China that have done illegal things, but we're never going to get access to them unless they make a mistake and go on the vacation in the wrong area. And let me say, vice versa. We have a lot of American hackers that they probably know of. And if they send us I don't know that they've ever sent us warrants and warrants for evidence, but we're probably not going to honor those either.
Right.
But I always tell people, I know my country's not, completely all clean hands, but our government hackers probably aren't installing ransomware and then extorting millions of dollars from businesses, right? There's a different intent. So.
But I think one of the things that's common, though, is they don't want to be found.
That's what I would say, that we probably do a better job of hiding, getting in, getting out type thing. Our hackers are pretty good. We're among the elite.
And so one of the things I found really interesting, and it was just like, heck yeah, that's exactly it. So once and let's just clarify malware. Are we defining malware and ransomware in the same? Is one mean the other?
Malware is everything. And so ransomware is just a subclass of that. But these days, even ransomware is mostly human directed, and they're dropping off trickbot Trojans and keyloggers and scripts. So really, the ransomware industry really is kind of the malware industry and vice versa. It's very commingled. But ransomware, if you're really talking specifically about a ransomware program, it's a subclass of malware.
Okay. So when I'll use just continue to use ransomware then as we go. But one of the things I think is, let's just put it into this conversation, like what ransomware does, because I think sometimes people think, well, ransomware does one thing, and if I have backups, I'm fine. But let's just talk about what it does, because you classify into 9 categories. Ransomware encrypts data. That's 1. 2, it exfiltrates email. I'm just going to say emails, confidential data, and I'm just going to leave it at that. It's exfilling data. Steals company employee and customer logon credentials. That's number 3. Extorts employees and customers. 4, spearfishes business partners with victims' own computers using real email. 5, conducts DDoS attacks against services the victim has up and running. And last one, publicly embarrasses the victim company. So I think that you've broken this into a kind of a stack of. Now, what I want to talk about is when you get a ransomware into the organization and it goes in, and it's resident within, it has to command and control out, correct?
Yes.
So it has to talk back. Maybe you can explain that process for everybody, because I think that's something that we just think it just hits, encrypts everything, and maybe you can explain how it happens and why they want to be quiet for a while before they actually take over.
Yeah, so a lot of times they're just quiet because the initial break-in piece is oftentimes because of malware, or somebody has done, they have what's called network access brokers that are separate from the ransomware guys that actually obtain the initial access and then are selling access. They literally have these websites that auction off, hey, I've compromised this $5 billion pharmaceutical company in the US or China with 78,000 employees, and then they'll have bids. So if you're a ransomware person, you're like, okay, $5 billion, that means I can ask for a lot of ransom. Oh, there's 78,000 employees. That means there's lots of opportunity for credential harvesting. But eventually to get out for command and control, very interesting. So command and control, CNC, C squared, C2. So there are these other computers, and they'll usually go out over HTTPS 90% of the time, but they also will tunnel outside of use DNS traffic. So they'll actually make fake DNS traffic where they embed the commands that are actually inside of the DNS query packet, because they know, they need to choose a protocol that the firewall will pretty consistently allow out. And a lot of people aren't sniffing their DNS traffic, and it just looks like text inside of a query, but the DNS server they're sending the query to just happens to be this command and control set, and they know to extract the DNS query to find out what the commands are. But the attacker, so what's interesting about CNC servers is they could be hosted anywhere. They could be hosted in Amazon, AWS, and Google. They're hosted in compromised business computers elsewhere, previous people that have been compromised. But even worse is they could literally be hosted on your computers, your devices. There's millions of routers and modems and stuff that are bots. And there are probably, and I'm just estimating this, I haven't seen the data, but I would just guess there's thousands of computers around the world owned by people like you and me that are complaining about how slow their internet is.
I saw that.
Like, oh, I hate Windows. I hate my internet connection so slow. And they're buying, maybe they even buy more bandwidth and like, it's so slow. And their friends are like, I use the same service and it's so fast. Well, they're hosting this command and control server unbeknownst to them that hundreds to tens of thousands of bots are connecting to await their instructions. And let me say, they move a lot. So every time usually the stager ransomware program, when it dials out, it connects. And the first thing it will usually ask is, what's the next address I connect to? Because in a couple of hours, they're going to use another dynamic DNS address that points to another IP address that is other people's computers. And they will actually uninstall themselves off of these compromised computers. So when the people run the scans and stuff, no, it's all clean. There's nothing there, but they still have the vulnerability or the password credentials that allow them to re-access at any time. And they're moving around and it's everywhere. And it's, so you're trying to, the idea that you're going to shut down the command and control servers can be very difficult. Like they have to get the dynamic DNS service to stop servicing these ransomware people. Let me say, most of the dynamic DNS services kind of know who the bad guys are. Okay. Because most people doing dynamic DNS aren't. Because
they would have to resolve to a kind of ultimately resolve to the host country, correct? Or
Yeah, and they're on what's called bulletproof hosting services and bulletproof networks that are in China and Russia. And these are advertised openly that these ISPs and DNS people promise not to shut you down. And, it takes years to get the warrants and shut them down. And they just move up to another name. The same people close that corporation, make up a new corporation. But eventually they all have some life out of them. But that's kind of with the command and control servers. Then the attackers are, usually guys, and they range anywhere from individuals to really professional corporate gangs. That some of them are actually publicly traded companies. Some of them are nation state people. There's actually cartels where multiple ransomware groups agree to cooperate and share customer lists and tools. But eventually some person dials into the command and control servers, gets the list of what they've compromised. Usually it lists the networks, or the Active Directory network name.
Okay.
And most people put their company's name in that. So they have a sense that if they see Sony, that, hey, this is one of the Sony entities, or could be a high school or a lab or a doctor or something like that. And then they will kind of pick and choose, okay, which ones, and let's say the average ransomware program is dwelling for 8 to 12 months without being detected, because they're also constantly re-encrypting themselves. So the antivirus people are always trying to keep up to date. EDR programs can actually detect them. Endpoint detection and response can detect these new programs, but hey, they're just one of 500 other new programs installed on everybody else's computer today. I've seen them so embedded in computers that people make them part of their corporate image. And then, they send it to Dell to make sure that this image, and inside of that is this ransomware program. And everyone's always assumed, it's some security program somebody installed. So it's actually, been approved. But eventually the human adversary then will dial in to the compromised victim. Like I say, they actually look to see if they use RDP, they're going to try to connect using RDP. If they have credentials, if they use LogMeIn or VNC.
Hold on, can I pause you for a moment before we move on? Because I definitely want to hit RDP and LogMeIn, but I want to pause because this command and control piece is really interesting to me, because most of the firewalls that are sold have outbound SSL inspection. If 90% can be, and I'm sure to inspect DNS as well. I don't know as much about that, but SSL, have very advanced defenses on layer 7 coming inbound, but outbound is really what we're concerned about. Most people have these firewalls that are fairly. I mean, any one of the top firewalls, the Fortinets, the Sonic Walls, the Palos, the Cisco's. I'm sure that they have outbound. I know they have outbound, because we sell a lot of them and service a lot of them, have outbound SSL inspection. But very rarely do people turn it on. And it seems like because it's hard to turn it on, because you've got to resolve all the legitimate certificates on the firewall to services that the employees are going to. But then you have this, odd traffic coming through. It seems to me that people would want to turn that on if 90%, just to kill the CNC traffic.
There's a lot of false positives and false negatives. A lot of, a lot of employees are like, hey, you're not going to, look into my banking transaction, or my Amazon transaction. There's a lot of reasons why. On top of it, it really is difficult to resolve it as being malicious. I mean, a lot of times they're going to, Amazon AWS and have the running on Amazon, or to Google. So they're not bad domains, because they're just using a free resource off of you don't know if it's good or bad. Although, let me tell you, one of my solutions for fixing the internet is this DNS-like service that every time there is a compromised node, let's say even on AWS or Google, that literally your computer, that it would be reported to a centralized DNS service. It's just like the regular DNS service, but all it does is host malicious domains. And your computer sends out one packet, just like a DNS packet, going, hey, is this domain that's trying to connect to me in email or whatever, is it malicious or not? And you just send out one packet, and then it goes to that service, and the service says yes or no, sends back a packet, yes or no. And if it says yes, then you handle it more accordingly. And actually, maybe there's a risk ranking in there. But the nice thing is, so when this AWS thing is compromised, you would be able to know the sublink that sublink has been reported as malicious. Because Microsoft and Google and all these people, there's, every antivirus company in the world kind of has this collection of malicious links. Right. And you have to buy their service and get their reputation service. I wish it was a public service. And, we would fund maybe a tiny, tiny tax to fund the people that would verify that the links really are malicious. But that way, for every communication, for every contact to our system, email, messaging, SMS messaging, you would just get your computer just go, hey, is this malicious? Yes or no? Nope, it isn't. Okay, now I can keep, and maybe your computer gets compromised one day. You don't know, but you're compromised. Well, then everybody would know from the first report that, okay, this address is compromised. When it gets cleaned up, it gets marked as clean again. And then everybody knows, okay, I can trust this. So that's been one of my ongoing ideas for 20 years, is that it's a shame that you have to pay to get those reputation lists, that they're different per vendor that you go with. I'm just surprised it's not just a core part of the internet, just like DNS.
Isn't Akamai, who's it? There's some company that resolves more DNS than anybody else on the internet, and maybe it's Akamai or some.
Yeah. You're right. There's that other. I'm sure Akamai, however they say it, is. They have to do a lot of it. But yeah, there's this other DNS provider.
Back in the old identity, do you remember Burton Group? Remember they ran these identity conferences in Southern California every year. And they were just experts in PKI and sort of 2000. I'm talking roughly 2004, 2005, 6. Had grand visions of how identity was going to be managed, and one of the big pieces was you need an identity broker. And so back then we're like, well, Microsoft really should take this on, or some other companies should take on being an identity broker, essentially the Azure AD, of the world, and whether for directory services. So maybe in some sense, someone needs to be the DNS resolution broker for trusted DNS.
Yeah, you could do. Yeah, again, do it through DNS or do it separately. But I'm just surprised, and I've asked for it, and I've talked to senior government officials, leaders of different countries, and I guess that's nice being 55 is that I have made some suggestions that have ended up being implemented in official government policy. And when that happens, like, oh my God, I made a difference. Although many times all I've done is moved one bullet point lower to now it's a higher ranked bullet point.
Yeah, right.
Like that literally is the accumulation of my professional career. I haven't fixed the internet, but I did move a bullet point on some charts that are official government policy now. But you take your wins where you can get them.
I've often said that I think that the internet's going to have to act and move towards a digital, like our body. And I know many of my listeners heard me say this, but if you cut your right finger, your body doesn't ask for permission to go remediate that problem. It sends white blood cells. It tries its damnedest to get that thing healed. And sometimes it doesn't work. Like you got to go to the hospital and you got to get it stitched or fix a broken limb. But there's automation built into this to our biology. And
we're so probably 10 years away.
Well, this is the thing. Yeah. The public-private partnership, I know it sounds kumbaya, but why can't we get NSA, CIA, FBI threat? Why can't we get some service that correlates those data points and then sucks it into everyone? And then all the vendors are participating in this. And I don't know if that is part of your plan, but a
third of the internet says you touch and do anything to me without my permission over my cold, dead body. That is one of the biggest problems of the internet is you have law enforcement that both wants to protect us, but also wants to make sure that they can spy when they need to. And then that's about 30% of the traffic going on. And then you have 30%. And let me say, some governments like China and Iran and India want to look into all your traffic and do in those countries. And then you have 30% of people like, never, this is crazy. You can't. They would literally rather die than let the U.S. government fix their computer. They think it's just this. But so what I think the future, this is just, I think 5-10 years out is good bot versus bad bot, at least in the corporate environment, that you will do these. You already have these threat hunters that proactively go looking for the bad guys. I think that's increasingly going to be automated through artificial intelligence bots. I think the bad guys are going to have their bad bots. They're already starting to automate their stuff like, oh, if I come across a Windows machine, I need to download my possible Windows exploits. No, I see it has Internet Information Server, download that exploit. Oh, user account controls enabled. I need to have a UAC bypass. So they're going to kind of be doing a Metasploit type download. It's an Apple machine. Let me download my Apple exploits. It's a Linux machine. Let me download my. And the good bots are going to go, okay, we're detecting this person that's doing this. We're going to fight this. So I think your self-healing, I think it's going to start on the corporate world. I think eventually it does have to get to the internet, right? Like, our cell phone providers, our energy. So internet's just an infrastructure. Just like fuel, just like telecommunications and telephones and energy and water supply, and they don't ask our permission to fix them when they find badness. And so I think you're exactly right that it will be there. I think it's starting in the corporate world, good guy versus bad guys, AI bots, and the evil genius of the future is going to be some kid that's a really good algo. That's what they say, like come out of finance and go to New York City and you become an algo and you'll make $1 million. Well, I think the Uber crime guys, the algo is going to be the second highest paid guy in the cyber crime guy, because he's got to beat the good guys, AI bots. And I think humans will always be involved, because in my experience, we can find half more, like the automated stuff finds automated stuff, and then we find about half more as a human being. We just see patterns and trends that are difficult for automated routines to find. So I think there's going to be a place for all of us, but I do think the future of the world is these self-healing networks, and they don't ask us permission. But why is it? I think that, what was it? It was FBI or Department of Justice through SolarWinds was running around fixing SolarWinds, patching SolarWinds people. And there was a huge outroar over that. I'm like, they're getting rid of a Russian bot.
But I'm even thinking less of them touching our machines, but just providing the threat intelligence to us, and so that we can suck it in. So that it's sort of like our right hand just got hacked, but our left hand doesn't know about it. So like our government knows, they know, but we can't get it down to in Palo Alto and SonicWall and all these vendors, they want to have their own little proprietary features, because that's how they add value. Well, I'd say that we should still be getting use of sticks or taxi or some protocol. We should be able to suck ingest this data.
I'm with you. But that's my solution.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I'm glad that at least I have one of your top 10. But one interesting too is that I had an top AI researcher on the show a couple of years ago, and he brought this concept. We're going to need. You said bots. Let's just call it AI bots. These AI bots are good bots, and they know when a bad bot breaches a normalcy. And I know probably some of the CrowdStrikes and others are listening going, we do that right now. But I'm talking about, like, there's so much sophistication that we've got to actually have a good AI that we know is sort of watching things and that can know when there's a bad situation. Is that sort of what you're talking about from the bot behavior?
Yeah. Okay. I think so. The difference is, I think we'll have actually automated autonomous roving code, so right now it's more sensors, and the bad thing has to kind of come in contact with the sensor. But I think what we're going to have is this roving code that just goes on and does its thing, and it's self-perpetuating, so a little bit different, a little bit more automation, a little bit more autonomy. And really the big question is it AI? When will we finally have real AI? People always talk about AI, but I don't hear about them making really good decisions. And we're still trying to, figure it out. Like, we're still trying to make our bots not be racist, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Things like that. So
I've talked to Sarah, some of the guys in the industry. They're like, we're still pretty ambitious about what we think AI is going to be and be useful, but we'll see how that plays out. One of the so back to RDP. So so the common, you have a whole section here on common exploit methods, and certainly I'm not going to go through all of them, but because it would take too long. But the top two being social engineering and patching. Mm-hmm. But then you also talked about RDP, and I love that. I love this because it's been such a problem for 20 years. But I'd love for you to explain the RDP, and you were going to talk about LogMeIn and these other access methods.
Yeah, so Microsoft's remote desktop protocol, they've had, I don't know, a decade or two. It's a protocol, but it also underlines products. It's for remote management. Most of us know that we can dial in to a single machine or over the internet, say dial in. I'm showing my age, into a single machine, take control of it and manage it. And it also underlines some other products that allow multiple people to share application servers and things like that. It's a very top, unpatched software, social engineering, number one, number two, social engineering is number one, unpatched software, number two. But then RDP is really strong. But how they're getting in through RDP, sometimes they have your credentials. So that happens often, that they have your credentials and they just one login, boom, they're in, and now they control the environment, upload the scripts. The other way is they do password guessing. against your RDP instance. And if you're not, if you're not paying attention and monitoring that, they can guess a lot. Like, at least publicly, the longest password I know publicly that's been revealed is welcome 2020 exclamation point, with some uppercase, lowercase, not super sophisticated. But what was amazing is it's still a fairly long, complex password. And they were able to guess something like 500,000 times a day for over a year. And they finally broke it. And they were able to start, I forget how many instances, but it was like 50 or 200 RDP instances. So they were able to really try, and they were not being stopped. Okay. And like, if you have the real administrator account enabled on a Windows environment, it can't be locked out. So you should always rename your administrator account and or disable it, because it cannot be locked out. So that, if I find that your administrator account is spelled, or find the renamed name, I can guess in perpetuity if it's not disabled. But the other thing is they find it unpatched all the time. They do password guessing against it. A lot of people, I think RDP gets an unfair rap, because if you keep it patched, and it's only had maybe 4 bugs in the last decade against it. And Microsoft has plenty of defenses, including digital certificates, so it can have its own VPN. Sure. And if the attacker doesn't have a private key, they can't even begin to guess against it, or a digital certificate based upon the private key. And so, but it's these days they're going after log me in and VNC. And that's kind of interesting, because they're living off the land. They'll kind of figure out, hey, how do they manage this environment? Oh, they're using Compact Insight Manager, from a decade ago. Or the Hilo, like the nation state guys, will go in and find, oh, you're running HP Hilo, and they'll actually, they're like, oh, it's buggy, and they'll infiltrate it. And that way they can actually be in your servers and turn them on even when they're off. But that's the living off the land. They're essentially, these ransomware gangs are morphing more into, we will do whatever it takes. But they absolutely are looking at the landscape of their target. And they're, most of the early work after they break in is, okay, user account names, what's their AD look like? And they're running PowerShell scripts, AD PowerShell scripts to get all this information. What apps are they running? Let's embed some email rules to get copies of emails, what type of servers, what type of email servers. That's actually the biggest part of their initial, after they get that initial foothold, they're going to install their program somewhere where it lives through a reboot, install a couple other instances of different programs so they won't be caught by the same antivirus or EDR program. And then they start querying using the commands. They'll actually look around and go, okay, what is this environment? Do they use Active Directory PowerShell? If so, we'll use that. If not, maybe we upload our own scripts. Oh, look at this. They use this other telemetry, and they'll literally use your telemetry. Good luck detecting someone using your telemetry that's logged in as one of your, users or admins, right? How do you detect that as being bad, right? Yeah, it's legitimate. It doesn't know.
That, like, the credentials, stealing credentials, it just appears as legitimate traffic.
There's a lot of defending software and hardware. It's like, yeah, we can detect. And it's like, okay, most of the bad guys have valid login credentials. Tell me how your device now detects and stops this, and it's like just crickets. Because that is the hard part. And telling and I love people like, oh, but this vendor has 100% guarantee and $2 million policy. If anybody actually detected 100% of malware and ransomware and actually stopped it at the level that they're claiming, and it was as easy as they said, everybody would buy that product. They could even charge an outrageous premium compared to everybody else, and everybody would buy that product, and we'd no longer have malware or ransomware. But you know what? We still have a lot of malware and ransomware because those products do not work as well as they say they do.
So, Roger, I want to get your thoughts on this question. So now we have the situation where, we used to be able to push 80% of the people behind a firewall and in at corporate offices, and then just the super users were working remotely, and we could get them in through SSL VPNs, all sorts of methods. But now everybody's working from home. That's not true. Companies now are in this hybrid straddled state, and it's become much, much more challenging for security to defend. But security to the rescue. We've now got acronym soup hell, EDR, MDR, next gen AV. We've got 5G access, high-speed access from homes when it was used to be just DSL. We've got all these magical savior. Oh, and we've got identity products. We've got CASBs and Microsoft and Duo and Okta, like all these saviors are going to rescue us. But hold on, just when acronym hell wasn't good enough, we've got zero trust. And I'm curious how you answer, and I just kind of want to tee up that conversation about what you think now as we straddle and spread about where you see things going with security and how people can respond to it in relation to ransomware and to the conversations we're having.
So it's funny you mentioned. So I'm not a big believer in firewalls, antivirus, or VPNs. Got to be a VPN. Got to be. Tell me what ransomware attack was stopped because you either did have it or didn't have it. Like I've yet to have a person go, "We got hit by ransomware. If only we had a VPN." Nope, the companies with VPNs are being hit just as frequently as the people that don't have it. The same thing with firewalls. So zero trust. Let me say, I actually like zero trust.
Okay.
I think it is kind of the future of computer security, but it's a very complex thing.
What is it? First of all, what is it in your mind? Like if you had to define it,
if you go back to the very basics, it's you don't trust anybody. The original firewall guy said, be careful about the soft, chewy center. Turns out we all have soft, chewy centers. And so what zero trust says is we're not going to trust you simply because you authenticated correctly, that you're in our environment. So what has been true of our attacks, at least for 2 decades, is the vast majority of attacks are client-side attacks where they're past the firewall, past the antivirus, past the VPN. They're executing in our user security context, elevating themselves, getting more credentials, and now they're just acting like they're regular users. So zero trust says you don't trust anybody, even claiming to be zero trust. I liken it to you get an email from somebody you know and love and trust. Or maybe Facebook. We've all had we're in Facebook or something, and all of a sudden you get this weird message that you know is a scam. Like, okay, I know that person and we've communicated and they're a friend, but their account has obviously been compromised. That's kind of zero trust.
Right.
Zero trust is saying that they're coming in with a valid account, but their behavior now seems suspicious. So our current security structure is kind of strange. It's like you put in your login name and password or MFA correctly, and now walk throughout the building. As much as you want to, right? Like it's like this all or nothing. And zero trust is we may allow you in, but we're going to evaluate your behavior and other characteristics, and we're going to rate you with a security rating. And when you go above a particular risk rating, we're then going to do additional things. We may block you. We may ask for additional authentication, but it's not going to be this binary. You put in your login name, and now you can, how many people go into their bank account and then go, hey, for the first time ever in my life, I want to transfer the entire balance to a bank in Russia, right? It's just not a normal behavior. And zero, so that's what zero, it's kind of like your credit card company. Most of the time we use our credit cards in America. You don't even have to put in PIN.
So yeah, you need context. And so with zero trust, you need context down to a user level. It's not about access control at the edge or edge computing now that's being pushed out. So you're saying that we need understand the behavior of that individual.
Yeah. And more than that, I mean, it's location. It's right. Could I logged in from Tampa and also in China in 2 hours? It's behaviors. It's am I doing the same transactions? Roger, every time he logs his bank account, he goes and looks at the bank balance. He's not transferring money. And what's interesting is the big guys, Microsoft and Google and all them, they've been doing these behavioral contextual analytics for a decade. Even when I left Microsoft 4 or 5 years ago, they were already collecting 120 other stats every time you logged into Office 365 or Hotmail at the time. Yeah. And Google was ahead of that. And so, they're having, it's a fight, right? Because they're having millions of people's accounts that are compromised every day. Microsoft revealed that 1 out of every 240 of their user accounts gets compromised every month. And I know that it's millions of accounts a day for both Microsoft and Google, but they're still very aggressively, and they're able to find a lot of them out if they just look. So I think, the future and zero trust is kind of like a credit card company. Like you'll mostly be allowed to do and buy, but one day I was buying, I remember me and my wife were in different lines at Walmart or something, buying some big TVs, and they were like, nope, is this really you? They allowed my transaction, blocked hers. And I had to say, yes, it was me in order for her to have it. And, that's kind of, think about it. The credit card companies are pretty good about figuring out, does Roger and Bill travel? What do they do when they travel? Do they go to the high end or low end? Or they drop shipping Amazon goods? So they have these highly big analytical engines. Matter of fact, their fear, it's weird. Most credit card companies think they've actually put down the crime to an acceptable business level, and they're worried about denying us our legitimate transactions, because if they do that twice in a year, we're likely to use somebody else's credit card product. So most of the services that are selling to the credit card companies are like, we will not block your customer's legitimate transaction. That's the big selling point. Well, that's what's going to happen in zero trust, is we're going to go through this process, and then it's kind of like, once you have really good social engineering training, you have people going, now my users are asking me every time I send out an email from HR, they're asking me, is this a real email? I'm like, it's actually a good place to be, where you have people being a little bit more skeptical. But then the pendulum will swing back, and we'll get people to the right healthy level of skepticism and culture that they need.
Yeah, unintended consequences. Well, it's what's interesting too is that back in the day, we would do disaster recovery planning for companies, and we'd have within their environments, and it was eventually cold, warm, warm site, a cold site, and then it became, okay, we just got to keep things always on, and it's interesting now with ransomware. I put it in the context of disaster recovery planning, and really just it's almost like, I hate to use the word, but next gen DR is, we've got to account for the likelihood. And the funny thing is, it's all about, we've always talked about DR from a risk perspective for decades, risk and likelihood of certain things happening, crater in the ground event versus a non-crater in the ground. And it was always difficult to get businesses to fund that unless you were regulated. But right now, there is a high probability that people are going to get, your business is going to receive ransom. So how do you approach, what are your thoughts about recovery exercises and such related to businesses? And where do you think we are in a maturity for most businesses you work with?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, Bill. I think that we're better than, I think ransomware forced us to be better.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of organizations are finding out they didn't have quite what they thought they did, or maybe they even had really great secure backups, but hey, it's going to take 2,000 years to restore this, works, but it turns out it's really hard to do across 800 servers or 8,000 servers really quickly. So, we definitely need maturity. And I would say the vast majority of people are still fairly immature to it, especially smaller businesses, because they're not putting, I'm always amazed by how many people say, oh, we have offline backup, 3, 2, 1, 3 copies of the data in the original place. And then we have 2 backups, and those 2 backups are in 2 different locations. One of them's offline. And I always say to them, can you access your offline backup if you need to restore in an online console? They're like, well, yes, of course. Well, it's not offline. If you can get to it, and the ransomware guys watching how you get to that backup, they can go destroy those backups or complicate your life significantly. Or they're like, well, I have it on, it's a VMware backup and the swaps here and this. It's online. They can get to it. That is literally what
I've replicated it offsite. I've replicated my backups offsite. I'm using VMware. Yeah, exactly.
But let me say, I'm so glad I don't have to be the backup expert, because you have to have a PhD these days to do it well and to make sure you do it effectively.
But from a leadership perspective, well, first of all, people in the vendor world, you have to go to the CIO and say, you got to make sure you have strong backups. And they're like, I have a whole fleet of people that do that. I said, well, have they proven it to you? That's a hard conversation to have, because no, I'm the top IT guy, and I'm just only concerned with strategy, and that's 2 below me. Well, guess what? Make people accountable to recovery exercise and recoverable. These are like CIOs at top level. They're not used to asking these in the weeds questions. Do we have RDP? What's the security around RDP? Well, guess what? Fix it, because it's probably not.
You're 100% right. And on the backup thing, they're like, there is not a compliance questionnaire in the world that doesn't go, do you test your backup? People, yes. And that could mean they restored a folder or a single server. and the reality is most organizations are not resourced to do really thorough testing. And that's when ransomware is going to become your test. And it shouldn't be that way. But I think in a lot of organizations, backup is just a tiny part of one person's job. It should almost be guaranteed to be a full-time FTE or not more if you're doing it right. And let me say, even the auditors, I'm, computer security auditor, we're like, hey, do you do testing, timely testing? We're like, yep, okay. And you check the check mark. And I think both sides have known from the beginning that we're lying to each other, but both understand that it's under-resourced and underfunded and a tough job. And by the way, I think that it really speaks to the cloud, right? That's one of the benefits of going to the cloud is like, if I get hit by a ransomware attack, maybe I'm not sure if my backup, but Microsoft and their Azure cloud and Google and Amazon, they kind of know how to back up data and restore it. And if they promise me that I can recover from a ransomware attack, well, that's why should I have to worry about that? I don't have to fund it. If I do it in the cloud, Microsoft says they're going to restore it if I have a problem. Well, that's a hell of a selling point.
Well, and the part that's really pretty interesting about this is that for sure, I had two board meetings over the past 2 days, and I was preparing them, because they're coming in from all just different directions, and you never know, they're not like you and I that's sort of like deeply entrenched. And so I'm giving them kind of the view of the world. And so we talked about cloud and digital transformation, and we like to talk about secure digital transformation, which is really just forklifting systems into the cloud and then making sure that we can take strategic advantage of that. Well, what about, how much cloud movement is there left? Like one question was, I asked myself was like, hold on, we've been talking about cloud for 10 years. How much of this is even left? Well, the statistics are really interesting. You can't find really good statistics. You can see, 60% remaining. And I found Gartner and IDC said 96% of the data is still on premise, still. And then I found others saying 60%. And I'm like, even if you're off by 20%, basically I came to this net, even if you're off by 20%, there is a tremendous amount of assets that are still on-prem that have to be moved to the cloud.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of cloud. I give some cloud security talks to members of the Cloud Security Alliance. And, what's interesting about it too, is then you have those other issues like who owns the data, right? And like, if I decide, I want to quit Salesforce and go to this other tool, can you extract your data to get it to a competitor? Are they going to make it easy for you to extract your data? It's their data, your data. You got to figure that out before you use the cloud service. And how hard is it to extract it? If the company goes out of business, early on, there were cloud services went out of business and would sell your data, or you just couldn't even get to your data. They're shut down, lights are off. What do you do, right? Feds have seized the computers, and the whole thing. Oh, maybe the warrants. Oh, like if they go to a cloud vendor, they can do the warrants and get to your data. You don't even know it happened, but if it was on premises, you would at least have to get the warrant yourself.
Right.
So there's other issues that pop up with clouds, but I'm a big fan. But that's amazing. You were telling me that. So it's that one stat.
Oh, you've got to go. You got to get back to me and just go afterwards. I typed in how much data is left on-prem, and I was like, okay, that didn't seem to work. All right, how much more data needs to move to the cloud? And because that to me, for some of the big players, is like, where's the market opportunity? And because we've bought several companies over the past couple of years, and everybody's trying to see, well, how much, what is the real challenge here? Why are people? Well, what happened is the big companies, I think the Fortune 100s over the past 5 years have been doing this, and this is a trend that I've seen even in security. They start signaling 2 years, 3 years ahead of time. And then I'm like, okay, they're signaling behavior that they're doing, but when is that really going to reach the mid-market, the small to medium enterprise? And then when does that reach the real small business? And usually I find it's like a 2 to 3 year trickle for the mid-market, and then another 2 to 3 for the small.
Yeah, funny story. I was recently gave a cloud security talk to the mom and pop sellers of lawn tractors.
Oh, that was fun.
So the parent company that helps manage selling lawn tractors said, "Hey, we're moving to the cloud, but we're having resistance, because of these mom and pop stores." So it was kind of interesting. I went, "Wow, like I can see these mom and pop, they like usually the husband's selling the tractors and the wife is the accountant and back end and taking care of sales, but they're really hesitant to go on the cloud. So they said, we really need you to kind of talk and promote it." But it said to me, okay, it's kind of, when it's reaching that level in middle America, we really are getting some penetration about what the cloud is. But so when you tell me that it's 96%, or, if you're to tell me 60% was still on-prem, that would drive me crazy. But
I'll send you the link. Well, it's interesting, there's 4 billion people left that are still not connected to the internet in the world.
God, no, that's shocking. That's shocking to me. That's shocking to me.
And it's sitting there, why are we so interested? Why is Elon circling the planet with satellites? Why is, Google, why is there a land grab? Because they just, we want to connect the world. But
maybe that's the magnetic interference playing with you that took out. Did you hear it was like 40 of his 48 satellites from his recent launch? First you go, he launched 48 satellites all at once. Oh my God, and it took out like most of them, and they're all burning up in the atmosphere. I'm like, man, that's a lot of space junk up there. But how would you like to be the guy that launches 48 satellites, whatever the number is, and then some rogue solar wind magnetic wave takes them out? Like we have never had to worry about that, right? But maybe that's what's going on with your microphone. Solar winds finally are making it through the Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah.
We used to blame.
I think so.
We used to blame any hard drive crash on that. Oh, it's like electronic. The sun had a solar flare 8 minutes ago. That's what's going on.
Roger, is there anything in particular that you wanted to end with? Like, Bill, I wish you'd asked me this question, or this popped in my head as we were talking that I just really want to make a point of before we go.
I'll say the same thing I say in most talks, which is your 2 biggest threats are social engineering and unpatched software. Social engineering is involved in about 70 to 90% of all attacks. Unpatched software is involved about 20 to 40%. Nothing else comes close. And it is people's inability to concentrate on that reality and mitigating that reality that allows hackers and malware and ransomware to be so successful.
This primer here, everybody see my little notes over this. I highly recommend it. I really, really do. I read a lot of books, and a lot of them I understand and I like them, and they're quite outstanding. A lot of the guests have been on here, but this one here, you can take it and you can utilize it immediately. And being in this security world, and it's just unbelievably useful, practical. And a lot of the questions I asked Roger are that I picked up the ones that I'm passionate about, but there's like a list of 10. And, I just picked the 1 or 2s, and we bounced around different chapters that I talked about. But Roger, this has been a pleasure. I always have a lot of fun talking to you, and until next time, do well and make sure you make that vision come true.
Thanks, Bill. I always enjoy talking to you.
All right, sir. Until next time. Bye-bye.